regarding where to pave in 2020.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Mark Govarecki with Hennessy Engineers, for those of you that don't know who I am. I was asked to do this presentation regarding the updated lead and copper rules and what it will entail for the city of Lincoln Park. Starting next year, in January 1st of 2020, the city will be required to have a preliminary inventory of all, if not all, but most of their water services, be it lead, be it copper, be it plastic, to the state. Beginning January 1st, 2021, the state will require each community that has lead services to beginning to replace them over a 20-year period. These maps that we have up is a map of the city of Lincoln Park and the number of lead services that the DPS is aware of. Currently, based on the information, the best available information that DPS has, there are approximately 4,124 lead services. As part of the new rules of Eagle, formerly the DEQ, communities were able to just do what they call a partial replacement of these lead services. That was basically from your water main to the property line to the shutoff. Well, now Eagle is no longer allowing a partial replacement. They are making the communities replace the entire lead service into the home, 18 inches into the home. Based on what we're seeing right now, the cost of these replacements are approximately $5,000 each. And based on a 20-year period, replacement of those, you're looking at just over 200 services to be replaced at a cost of just over $1 million. In discussions with the DPS, we've looked at the water system. The water system is aging, as everybody knows. And rather than trying to connect a new service to old water main, we estimated out a 20-year program of what it would cost to replace not only the services, but as well as the water main, hydrants, valves. It works out to just over $77 million in today's numbers. It works out basically per year to replace, on an average, 6 miles of water main, along with the water services that we run into that are lead, just over $3.7 million a year. That would be approximately 32,000 feet of water main and the services. That also includes, which the city, the DPS the water department runs into, our lack of pavement, where they have to go in, shut the water off at the curb stop. If they come across a lead service, that lead service, per the new rules, has to be replaced. We estimate approximately 50 of those services a year. That's another $250,000. This rule begins in 2021. Also, when you do your lead and copper samples, if you do come across a sample that exceeds the current threshold, those have to be tagged, those have to be replaced as soon as possible. Recently, the samples were done here in the city. 2 of the samples exceeded. We are in process of dealing with the low bid contractor, awaiting his insurance forms, And he's scheduled, hopefully by the end of this week, if not early part of next, to go in and replace those 2 water services. So overall, you're looking at approximately $4 million a year over the next 20 years. And it's not an easy pill to swallow. But if you, with the amount of breaks in some of these sections, if you went in and tried to repair or put a new service in, I'd say odds are that pipe's going to fail. Just trying to drill the pipe and then add a clamp, and the cost will just go up. So I gave each one of you the changes that the state has recommended. There's explanations in there, what they consider a lead service. It doesn't necessarily have to be entirely lead from water main to the house. There's what they call lead goosenecks that they consider as an entire lead service, which a lot of places you don't know where those lead goosenecks are. So that 4,124 number could be even greater if you uncover any of the goosenecks. So I'm open for questions. If I can answer them, if I can't answer them, I'm sure John Kazoo can answer them. And if I've missed anything,
What would the cost be without the replacement of the water mains? You're talking about the complete replacement of the water line for whenever there is a lead pipe that has to be replaced, right?
if the $3.8 million, that's water main plus the lead services. Just the lead services have been estimated out. If based on the 20-year time frame that the state's allowing the communities to do the replacements, you're looking at just over 200 services per year at approximately $5,000 each. It works out to just over $1 million, like $1,030,000, just to do the lead services themselves and
that's
not do anything with the mains.
That's what we're mandated to do, is that
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
the other part would be a little bit of luxury if we decided to go that way to forestall future problems.
Correct.
Does that be the consideration
Well,
for that?
Can I
Sure.
put my 2 cents in? If you don't mind, John Kazoo. The city went through what I call a water audit. And basically, they come in and look at what's going on in your community. What are your plans for futuristic water main replacement? When we got the results, the written results of this water audit, the city has to provide a 5-year plan for replacing the water mains and a 20-year plan. Now, stepping one step forward with that, we have to change out approximately 4,100 service leads. Now, those 4,100 equate out to be a little bit greater than $20 million in the next 20 years. What we have been doing so far is in our road reconstruction projects, we've been replacing the water mains and the water services. Now, with the age of the infrastructure, and Eagle is forcing our hand because we have to provide them a capital improvement plan for the next 5 years and the next 20 years. What I'm afraid of is if we arbitrarily go down any one block in the city that has lead services, some of these mains, I'm afraid, may not be receptive to us drilling an additional hole to put in what they call a corpse stop. And if we find any bit of lead during a water main break in a home service, we're going to be required to change that out also. The other part that Mark told you a few minutes ago about during the summer, when we go through the typical water shutoffs for non-payment, And I'll give you one example of one district, and we've got 7 of them. We may have to put out notices to 150 homes. Of those notices, we may end up having to turn off 70 of those addresses until they make their payment. Of those 70, we'll have to dig up 5, 6, 7, 8 service leads. When we dig up those services to repair that curb stop box, we may find lead on either side of that curb stop box. And if either side of that water service is lead, we got to change out the entire service lead from the main into the inside of the home. We also have to provide the state with how we're going to fund this process. They're coming down on all of the older communities that have these lead services. We know that our water system is starting to fatigue. And so far, we haven't been, other than underneath the roads that we have been replacing anything beyond that. And that in itself is a big chunk of money. But my recommendation, and I think Hennessy Engineering is under the same thinking, if we're gonna, let's try to maybe target, if the road phaser ratings concur, try to target the roads with the larger volume of service leads. Because when you change out the water mains, we have been changing out the services going to the homes. Also, that part of the service that we have to change out, a lot of the service leads in Lincoln Park were 3/4 inch. We now have to upgrade those to a 1-inch size. And as we're going through on these road projects, if we can change out the main to coincide with our capital improvement plan that we have to submit to the state, also change out service leads, because we have to do 5% per year for the next 20 years. It's as Mark said, it's a very, very bitter pill to swallow, but we have to provide this financial information to the state. Right now, I've gotten them, originally they wanted all this information back by November 3rd. I've asked them for an extension to January 1, which they have granted, but they've got some precarious questions. We don't know how to answer their questions. I mean, some of the questions are per section, and we don't know what section means. Does that mean per block? Per section, what is the age of that main? I don't know where to locate that information. Even if we dug it up to look at it, I don't know how to tell when it was put in, what the age of it is.
Have you shared that 5 and 20-year report with us?
We just got it, because this is the one that the cities have been fighting, and we just got it, I think it was November-ish, where this, basically the judges,
September, October, just recently.
because this is one that communities, including Great Lakes Water Authority, the Oakland County Water Association, everybody's been fighting, and they just kicked it back to the cities and said, tough, you have to do it. And again, it's an unfunded mandate.
For the individual lines that come in. They're not mandating that the water mains themselves and the water lines that run into the street be replaced. This has to do with the lead lines leading from the house to connecting that. Is that right?
That law is for the lead service leads.
Okay.
But the city still has to provide a 5-year capital improvement plan and a 20-year capital improvement plan.
Well, I understand that, but what you're talking about at $7 million a year is fairly extensive. And
Yes.
I don't see a way that we can afford that. I mean,
I'm just delivering the news.
I understand that, but we have to do what we have to do. Now, if we were to replace that line as you suggest, then all the things going into each home would have to be replaced also, wouldn't it?
Well, and that's what we are doing, but not necessarily into the home. If there's a copper service lead at any one street, or I mean, a street that we reconstruct, if it's a 3/4 inch, by law, we have to change it to a 1 inch. But from the curb stop box going into the home, if that's a 3/4 inch copper service, no, we don't have to change that out. But if it's lead, we have to right into the home, and we have to incur those costs.
Okay, so we have 20 years to accomplish and go through 4,000 that have to be replaced? Is that that's the figure for that?
To our knowledge, yes. Because
Could
of
have been
discovery, we may
discovered.
find more.
Been discovered hence. And my understanding now that in 2021, that if we do a shut-off for lack of payment at a house that has a lead line, then that has to be repaired or replaced before it can be turned back on? Is that, or did I mishear that?
The answer is yes, and that actually starts right now, even though it's not 2021. Because other communities have asked that same question. If we have to dig up a curb stop box, can we do a partial replacement? And so far, I believe the answer is no, it has to be a full replacement. Or am I misspeaking?
That hasn't been, that is one of the questions that a couple communities have directed to Eagle, and the state hasn't come up with a solid answer. If there's an issue with the curb stop, if there's an issue with the corp at the main, if that constitutes a full replacement right away. There, I don't know what direction the state's gonna go with that, because I consider that as maintenance, and in their eyes, that might be completely different. I'm still waiting from Eagle, from the district engineer, for the final answer on that one. But ultimately, it will have to be replaced. Maybe not that second, if they decide that they consider that maintenance, or in, like John said, if they have a shut-off and they have an issue with the corp, does that constitute them replacing it? Does that mean that they have to replace the entire thing right away?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we need to have a capital thing for 5 and for 20 years also. But just where these areas where they have the lead pipes going on are not the only water mains and things that are aging in this town,
No.
right? So
Yeah, you're
it's
right.
the problem that goes all over. So we have to have something that's comprehensive, and it's just not ignoring the other places, the other parts in town that are going through the same thing with the water main breaks and stuff, just to take care of the lead issues. Now, with this, as long as we get it done within 20 years, with periodic replacement of lines, we should be all right, I would imagine.
The capital improvement for 5 and 20 is for the entire water system.
Right.
I don't think that's the way the mayor understands it.
Well, I understand that would what we would be putting out, but I don't think that we should put all of our resources into taking care of this first. I mean, we have, well, maybe, but there's people with lead in their water too, so got to hear that out, I guess.
Yeah, and the numbers we came up with, Mayor, were based on replacing up to 6 miles of water main per year as part of that program. It may not be all in the area of where we replace the lead services, because on average, we have to do at least 206 a year for the next 20 years, starting in 21. There might be areas outside those areas that we may be replacing just the water main and copper services as well. But the big thing is we want to hit those lead services first.
Have any thought to how we could pay for this if we were to go for this $7 million a year?
It would be about 4 million, actually. But, so see, you're saving 3 million on it.
So what does this count?
But in all actuality, that 4 million is just on the water side. Like you said, there's aging infrastructure elsewhere too.
Because there's more that goes, if you're ripping up the water lines, then you're tearing up the street.
Right, and those numbers that we're basing it on is actually with street repairs. We're figuring roughly $100 to $110 to $120 a foot per replacement. But you're right, there's other issues out there just besides the water main.
Okay, I don't mean to monopolize this. So
No,
anybody else that?
Your Honor, I do
Yes.
have a question. If we do it, it just almost seems like strategically, we should do it when we're doing the roads.
Right.
Is the cost there lower than any other time? Let's just say, if we're doing it when we're doing the roads, is the cost lower?
Here comes our road expert.
We're already doing lead water service replacements. Ryan Kern with Hennessy Engineers. We are working on lead water service replacements in 2 other communities that have been in conjunction with road projects. The more you do, the less the cost is going to be. So for one community, we're currently doing 71 replacements as part of that project, and the average cost of the water service replacement was just over $3,500. The other community, the lots are smaller than what you see here in Lincoln Park, and we're doing over 200 as part of a road project, and it's about 3,000. So if you do them in bulk, I would expect the cost to be lower than 5,000. But where we're doing just a few here and there with some of our other communities, we're seeing it at 5. We've seen the low bid at $5,000. We've seen some contractors bid as high as $7,000 or $8,000 per lead water service.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Now, you've unfunded mandate that's been thrown around. Now, the state of Michigan is putting in the services in Flint, and they're paying for them. Is there any hope that the state can help us with these?
From what the state has told us, no. You have a couple different processes. You have DWRF, but that's not free money. That's a 20-year low-interest loan. But that doesn't guarantee, if you were to submit for one, that you're going to get it.
So what you're saying is Flint is just getting a loan?
From my understanding, no. They were given a lot of money. A lot of free money.
I think we ought to go up to the state level and see what the politicians up there can do for us. Because for them to do Flint and not do other communities, I think that's a shame. It's illegal. It's a scam. So I think we better try to fight with the state and get it done.
I'm not arguing with you, Councilman. I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, they gave a lot of money to Flint, and now they say the well's dry.
Your Honor,
Okay, and
So is our well dry.
how about grant money?
Well, that's basically what the DWRF is. It's a low interest loan, 20-year loan, but you're not guaranteed of receiving it. And if you're mandated to do 5% a year and you don't get it that 1 year, you still have to change out over 200 services at just over $1 million.
oh, John, sure.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, perhaps Mark or Ryan, whichever, or John, maybe you could kind of back up a little bit and explain to the council and those that'll be watching this meeting now and perhaps later on when it's on display, how did the state change the lead standards? And because we weren't facing this a couple of years ago, now we are, and there's a pretty impactful reason why.
A lot of it was because of Flint. When the lead issue came up in Flint, what had happened was they used to get their water from DWSD, which is now Great Lakes Water Authority, in the infinite wisdom, they came up with the idea to save money was to reopen and restart the city of Flint's water plant. Water plant there got their water from the Flint River. And when they started processing the water, they did not add the chemical to combat the lead, to protect the lead pipes from the lead leaching into the water. That's what started the lead issue in the city. And at that time, the lead threshold level was 15 parts per billion. Now, with the changes that the state has made, it'll go from 15 parts per billion to 12 parts per billion. They've changed the way the water's tested, the samples. If you have a lead service, they used to only require one bottle sample. And that was after allowing the water to run for 5 minutes. Now the new sampling is you take the first liter of water that you draw right off of your faucet, draw the next 3 liters, dispose of that, and then the 5th liter. And they'll test those 2 different liters. The first draw, what they call, and the 5th draw. If those exceed, it's still right now 15 parts per billion, but the new law is going to be 12 parts. 2 of the samples here in the city did exceed the 15 parts per billion. A lot of these changes are because of the Flint lead issues. I've read recently that the EPA is looking at the possibility of making their rules stricter than what the state is going to use. And if that's the case, the state will have to follow the EPA new rules. So it's going to get tighter, and I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see it below 12 parts per billion, ultimately.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
This project was thought, I think, by common sense, I hope, up in Lansing with engineers as well as politicians. I don't know if you could answer that, because usually it's an advisory council. I would hope they put this, knowing all the parts of how this is going to go.
I would think so. I'm sure it wasn't strictly the state. I'm sure they had other individuals involved in it. But, yeah, I can't see just a couple people going, hey, let's try this today.
The reason I'm asking is because you're just telling us the dynamics as an engineer, okay, or from our engineering firm, and I imagine every city is going to have the same, different engineering firms have the same questions, they say it's comments, the same idea, I can't tap into an old water main because I'm not sure what's going to happen if I change the line out, and so on and so forth, so on and so forth. So what I'm saying is that the state, looking at the communities as a whole and the infrastructure, should have had some kind of awareness that this is not money that people, it's got to be done, but you're not going to pluck it out of the sky. Somebody's going to pay for it, and somebody's going to pay for it in a short period of time. On top of everything else, we talked about the 5 and 20-year plan for the infrastructure itself. So you got a double-edged sword. You're doing the lines, okay, and then you got to do the infrastructure at the same time. Plus, you got to maintain everything else you got, okay? And that, like the mayor was talking about, not just, those 2 issues that are mandated. The question I got is that it sounds like reading this is that they're going to test the water quicker, and not quicker, but more frequently and on a larger scale to get a more idea of how much lead's in the system. Am I right or wrong?
They did already make that change,
Okay.
Councilman. Before it was communities like Lincoln Park, Allen Park, Southgate, even Belleville, which has 4,000 people, they had to do 5 samples. And now, based on your population, those 5 samples went up to, on an average, Lincoln Park is, how many? You did 30.
Right.
River Rouge, Ecorse, had to do 20. a small city like Belleville, which has a hard time trying to find enough sampling points, had to do 20. And that's 4,000 people. So with all these communities that used to do 5, now they've bumped those up. Communities like Livonia and Detroit, they had to do hundreds of samples. Thank God GLWA, as part of the community's cost to GLWA, they did all the sampling. They did all the testing of the samples at no charge to the communities. Those charges, I'm sure, were baked into what their fixed costs are per month. But if you would have to take those to a private lab, you're probably spending a couple $100 a sample.
What happens if we have this discussion about, and when we do the roads, we do the water, the lines, okay? What happens is every year we do the 30 samples, and we find out 15 of them failed, and they're not even in the area. So we'd have to do those 15 immediately, probably, on top of the ones that we got scheduled. So there's no dynamics as far as figure, because the figure floats too much depending on, and obviously, looking at the map here, there's quite a few, and they're not all in the area we're doing the roads, no matter how you look at it. Okay?
Right. You got some that are sporadic in areas, then other areas, every house appears to have a lead service.
And going back to what John Kazoo was saying, is that if we turn off the water, which he was explaining how the turnoffs work and how many, if those indicate they are lead, those are gonna have to be done right away too, am I correct?
That's still under debate.
Debatable?
We're still waiting on an answer, but I wouldn't hold my breath on it. I would probably consider the worst and say, yeah, they have to be replaced.
Well, that's why I'm trying to get an idea, no matter what's proposed, there's still the variables we're all talking about that's gonna have to be done out of the city's budget somewhere along the line, and you can't pay for something you don't have the money allocated for, but the timing's gonna be on top of what you gotta, do, is what I'm trying to say. So how do you, there's no way to compensate for that, right? Because you don't know. I mean, if the 30 samples come in and we're lucky and only 2 of them, that's fine, but you never know, because they're supposed to be random throughout the area, am I correct? Or some kind of system, or?
You have a list of services and addresses that, the way the state sets it up is, you have to find 30 houses that have the lead services. Normally what happens is, once you start testing them, you usually continue to test them until you change out that lead line. Then you move to the next group, or pick out a couple other. And John, I don't know how you guys had set yours up, but I'm assuming that throughout the city where you knew you had lead services, you didn't concentrate everything and.
Actually, we did it a little bit differently. What we chose to do, because in previous years, we only had to do 5. Now, all of a sudden, we have to do 30, and we had to do them between July 1 and September 30th. Otherwise, we would have been in violation of this new state mandate. What we did is, we knew the addresses that we believe had lead services. We chose to put it out on the city's webpage and Facebook. Anybody that wanted to volunteer, we would take those volunteers. We would check and see if on our list if they were a lead service, and if they were, we arranged to do the testing at their home or from their water service.
That's all I got, Yarn, thank you.
Yeah, I was one of those lucky people that found out, had a little lead in the lines. Anything else from? All right, hearing none, then we will move on to, you're going to stay with us as we go through the road portion, though, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
I will move on to the
One
road
additional
section. Yes,
comment.
go ahead.
The reason we brought it up now is because when we do water turnoffs, or if we come up with discovery of lead services, we wanted to give you the opportunity to because we're going to be going through the budget process. And we're going to have to try to come up with some money for this. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Ryan Kern with Hennessy Engineers again. So we'll move into the roads portion of the study session here. It's that time of the year again to start talking about getting ready to design and bid out projects for the next construction season. I guess before getting into that, I know we've had a few calls and concerns about wrapping up this year's road program. Just to give an update to council, obviously we weren't expecting the snowfall that we got last week, and that did shut down our projects here for a few days, but they're back up and running here this week. We do have 2 contractors still working in town. We have HMC finishing up the utility pavement repairs throughout the city. They hope to fill in all the open holes that are still out there on Wednesday and hopefully be wrapped up with those patches here this week. We also have GV Cement working on White Street east of Fort Street and on Pagel between Applewood and New York. They are pouring concrete this week. They did start pouring concrete on the second half of White Street today, working from Chandler, working back to Fort Street, and they'll finish that main line paving on Wednesday. And then they're also on Pagel. Tomorrow we'll be doing the remainder of the sidewalks and driveway approaches, and then they have half of the intersection at New York still to finish off here this week as well. So hopefully everything will be kind of wrapping up here in the next week or two. At least the weather's improving here this week, and looks like it'll still be in the 40s here into next week. So by Thanksgiving we should be wrapped up. There will still be some restoration that'll need to be addressed in the spring, but we'll have the contractors clean everything up and basically have it prepared so that they just need to come back in and do the seeding. I don't know if there's any other questions before I get into the 2020 program. If anybody has any questions on this year's road program.
Is this going to be on the screens
It's
also?
not, it's not.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question through the chair. Are the projects that we allocated all going to be done? So I know a couple of them still aren't done, and obviously we're not going to get to it. That's what my question is. Are there some that we had scheduled, but because of the weather and whatever, that we won't be able to get to this year is what I'm getting at?
The only project that wasn't fully completed would be the concrete sectioning program. They did start on Stewart and Riverbank streets last month. The intent was they should have been able to finish the work, but with the snowfall and the cold, they still have the second half of Riverbank from Fort to Lafayette, and then the one block on Emmons from Dix to Winchester, the short block there that they were not able to start. They were going to start opening those up here the week before it snowed, and we told them not to, knowing that this snow was coming in. Fortunately, we stopped them since at the time they were only predicting an inch of snow. That contractor has shut down for the season. That's the only contractor that we're working with right now that has shut down for the season, so they will have to come back in the spring and finish that off. But there will be no open holes on that job, so other than that, all the other projects will be fully complete, other than restoration issues this year.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't want
Go
to,
ahead.
there was, through the chair, there's 2 that I know that are still not done, but they were on the list. That's why I'm asking. They're not in the ones you just explained, so maybe we'll talk off.
Utility pavement repairs?
Yeah,
Or-
there was on Cleophas down here past Lafayette where there was a problem. And then in Riverbank where they did the utility repair, they cracked the area right next to it, and we talked about going back
Yeah.
and fixing that, and that never got done. And I know the weather, that's why I'm
Okay.
asking. Just-
Yeah, let's talk about that afterwards,
Okay,
because I know
that's
I
fine.
talked to the contractor about both those locations,
Good
getting
enough.
those done.
Thank you, Your
so.
Honor. I'm all set. Anyway.
All right, so moving into the 2020 program, I did give a handout out to everyone. A lot of the stuff in the beginning here is repetitive from some of the presentations that I've given in the past, as far as just a reminder, as far as what streets are owned and maintained by the city and which aren't. Obviously, MDOT maintains Fort Street and Southfield west of I-75, and then Wayne County is responsible for maintaining Dix-Toledo Highway, Moran Street west of Dix-Toledo, Outer Drive, and then Southfield Road east of 75. All the other streets in the city are owned and maintained by the city. So it's roughly 115 miles that the city is responsible for. Back in April of 2017, our office went and evaluated all the city streets, gave them a rating, 1 through 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, in order to better prioritize projects for the next several years. So a 2-man crew did drive all the streets, and we rated those using RoadSoft GIS software. that was developed by Michigan Tech, and that's what's used and recommended by MDOT to do the ratings. And we do provide those ratings to SEMCOG and to the State Transportation Asset Management Council for their information as well. Originally, we were going to present tonight what we're proposing for the 2020 and 2021 road programs. I know previous city manager, Matt Koppler, had asked us to present that. Though recently, we applied for some grant money through SEMCOG to reevaluate the streets in 2020, and we did get approved for that. The city will be getting just over $2,500 to assist with funding that, which is probably cover about 50% of the cost to evaluate all the streets. So we'd like to do that and reevaluate the streets here in the spring before we present the 2021 road program to you, because I think some streets probably, one in particular I know of is Goddard Road between Dix and Fort Street. We rated that in a good to fair condition in 2017, and that's deteriorated quite rapidly here to where recently driving it, it's probably more like a 2 or 3 already. And I think that's a result of the alkali silica reactivity, which we've talked about in the past. A lot of concrete streets back in the 90s and early 2000s had some bad aggregate within that within the concrete mix, and that's why we're seeing some of these concrete streets that were built at this time deteriorating from the joints outward, and that's exactly what's happening out on Goddard. So I think it'd be best to reevaluate the streets here in the spring before we present the 2021 road program. I did in the packet did show the ratings map that we did in 2017, and just give the brief summary again of what we saw in 2017. And at that time, 14.5% of the streets were rated good, either rated a 7 to a 10. Just over half the streets were rated fair with a 5 or 6 rating, and then about a third of the streets were rated 1 through 4, being poor. And at that time, it was estimated that it would take about $102 million in 2017 dollars to address all the streets in the city to make them good condition. We originally evaluated the streets in 2012, so from 2012 to 2017, there's a table here in the packet that shows that the overall rating of the streets decreased over that time. You say from 2012 to about 2016, the city wasn't doing a whole lot of road work, and in 2016, we started to ramp up road work where we started doing about $1.5 to $1.7 million of road work every year starting in 2016. And then last year, with the addition of the road bond program, we did about $4.5 million worth of work. So I would expect next year that we see the overall rating to increase and continue to increase if we continue to do the amount of work that we did this past year. We also every year do apply for federal aid assistance for some of our major roads. There's about 10 streets or so in the city that are eligible for federal aid assistance that would cover 81.85% of the construction cost. Emmons Street, east of Fort Street last year was done with federal aid assistance, and we did get awarded for this coming construction season to reconstruct River Drive from Emmons to just south of Ford Boulevard. So that will be done next summer with federal aid assistance. We have been applying for the last 2 years. We applied for sections of London, Champaign, and Harrison, which are all asphalt streets. We've applied for those for federal aid assistance. Hopefully in the near future, we can at least get one of those. We do compete against all the other communities in Wayne County except for the city of Detroit for what's available for federal aid assistance. Usually there's about 55, 60 projects that are submitted each year, and about 5 to 7 are usually approved each year, depending on the amount of money. So we continue to apply every year and hope that we can get some more in the future. One of the maps up here that I've got on the easel here shows all the road work that we've completed since 2016, and there's been a significant amount of work that's been done since 2016 if you look at the map. And I did provide a larger copy in the back of your packet too, because I know the one in the presentation is a little small. Since 2016, we have done 9 concrete reconstruction projects that total 1.25 miles. 20 street segments have been milled and resurfaced with new asphalt, which accounts for 4.6 miles. We've done concrete patch repairs or sectioning on 20 street segments, just over 3 miles. We've also replaced 7 intersections with CDBG funding, and we've joint and crack sealed streets that are rated good to continue to have them in good condition, almost 12 miles. So we have addressed since 2016 approximately 18% of the city's street network. So going into 2020, we have proposed what we have attached here, and this isn't set in stone, I mean, we can change some of the streets that we're proposing here. We will, within the next council meeting or two, providing a design and bid proposal to you for approval. So if any changes need to be made, I know we've discussed what we proposed with DPS and DPS committee and made a few tweaks in here, but what we're proposing currently is similar to what we've done in the past few years, where we do what we call a mix of fixes, where again, we do a little bit of concrete reconstruction, some asphalt mill and fills, some concrete sectioning, try to balance that out and do a few streets of each, try to do some major and some local streets, and try to mix that up, and also spread the work out throughout the city as well, as best as possible. So what we're proposing for 2020, and that's based on the PASER ratings that we did in 2017, and also we put a priority rating to it based on number of homes on that street, traffic counts and all that. What we're looking at for concrete reconstruction is Monty from Lafayette to Pennsylvania, Monty from Austin to Ethel, Pagel from Electric to Applewood, Ford from Goal to River Drive, University from Fort to Fort Park, and White from Porter to Dix. All of those streets were rated either a 1 or a 2 in 2017. That accounts for just short of a mile of streets at about $2.3 million. Those projects will also include water main replacements and lead water service replacements where we do find those. I did attach at the back of the packet a list of all the streets that were rated a 1 or a 2 in 2017, and those highlighted in yellow would be streets that have been completed or would be completed in 2020. And more than half of those, after 2020, more than half of those streets will have been addressed, and we'll continue to address those each year. One of them on that list, it's towards the bottom of that list, but we're proposing it for 2020, is Ford Boulevard. It doesn't have as high of a priority rating just because of its location in the city, but it does have several homes along that block, and almost every home along that block has a lead water service. So that is a reason why we're selecting that project for next year. I think we had 45 lead water services just in that one block. Overall, I think it was 65 lead water services on all the reconstructs that we would have to address based on the city's current inventory. For asphalt milling and resurfacing, we have 8 segments that we're proposing for next year. For major streets, Fort Park from New York to Stewart, Lincoln from Applewood to River Drive, and then for local streets, College from Fort Park to Lafayette, Horger from Dix to Porter, LeBlanc from Howard to Lafayette, Mayflower Fort to Fort Park, Philomene Fort Park to Lafayette, and Warwick Lafayette to Howard. These streets were all rated either a 3 or a 4 in the PASER rating. So we try to do this work before it deteriorates to the point where we have to reconstruct the street. And usually an asphalt resurfacing will last about 15 to 20 years.
What's the reasoning behind Horger Street? Is it in that bad a shape? Because that is not a highly traveled road, I wouldn't think.
I think I'd have to look back, but it was either rated I think it was rated a 3. We're looking to, we haven't done a lot of work in that northwest quadrant of the city, so trying to get some work done in that area. That was one of the worst rated asphalt streets in that area north of Southfield and west of 75.
Okay.
And that was a reason for selecting that street. That counts for roughly 1.5 miles at $1.23 million. And then for the concrete patch repair program, we have 7 street segments that we're proposing. These streets were rated either a 4 or a 5, and again, we're looking to try and replace deteriorated sections of concrete and try to save the road as much as possible before it gets into the point where it's too deteriorated to where we have to reconstruct, and it's going to be a lot more costly. So we're looking for major streets on London from Fort Park to Lafayette and Porter from Morris to Outer Drive. Local streets, Cleveland, Lafayette to Howard, Progress, Green to Alper, River Drive from Emmons to North Shore, Rose, North Wayne to Bailey, and Winchester from Emmons to Abbott, which accounts to almost 1.5 miles and almost $1 million in cost. And then we'll also be looking at joint sealing good rated streets to keep them rated at a good rating. Usually we do about $100,000 worth of joint sealing each year as well. So in summary, it comes out to another $4.5 million, similar to what we did this year is what's being proposed. Out of that, about 1.7 would be coming out of Act 51 funding, which is the gas tax money that the city receives from the state each year, and then about $2.8 million out of the road bond funding. Based on this proposal, currently we have about 18% of the network that's been addressed. So after 2020 with this proposal, we'd be at almost 25% of the street network being addressed at this point since 2016. And I do have a summary of the streets in more detail attached here that we're proposing. And then again, I do have detail on the streets that were rated 1 or 2, showing which ones are still out there to be addressed. A lot of them that still need to be addressed are what I would call collector streets. There's streets where homes don't front those streets. There might be driveways that do. But trying to focus more on those streets that have homes or fronting those streets rather than the side streets, trying to get those done first. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain those.
Through the chair? Yes. Ryan, thank you very much. My question is on the houses that you identified that you're going to replace the lead up front, what did that cost come up to? Do you know how many homes times $5,000?
65 homes, I believe, is what, out of all those concrete reconstruct projects that we proposed, I believe it was 65 homes that have lead water service replacements. We would estimate it at $5,000 per service, but that's to be conservative. I would guess that it would be slightly less just because we're doing so many.
So that's some of the money we need to come up with next year in that regard.
So the water main replacements and the lead water service lines, those costs would come out of water and sewer funding. Yes, those costs are not included in what was presented here tonight.
Through the chair,
Yes, sir.
did you check all the schools to make sure there was no lead services for the schools?
That I don't know. I would guess not, because most of the schools are probably have 3 or 4 inch mains going into them. They're not 1 inch lead services.
Well, I think they should be tested. I mean, a lot of our kids go there. You said you haven't done much work over in the northwest quadrant over there?
Right.
Rio Avenue, I got complaints about that a long time ago from Porter to Dix. I drove down there and that's like a marsh through there. It's white and it says on here, but it says 2, but it doesn't have any plans of resurfacing that street. It'd be a good one for asphalt, in my opinion.
We'll take a look at it. It's possible that's deteriorated in the last couple of years to where it may be a candidate. We'll take a look at
They
that.
patched some of it, but it's really bad.
Okay.
Your Honor. Through the chair, I'd like to answer Mr. Parkinson, because I work for the schools in the maintenance department, and I can tell you the state comes through and does testing on all the schools on a regular basis for water. So just because I know people will be watching and want an answer to that question, and so I wanted to relieve everybody that the state does come through and our water has been tested.
Well, thank you, sir. The city of Detroit, I think that a lot of their schools flunked and they had to put in filters.
Yes, we are putting some filters in some buildings, but that will still make us be okay.
As long as they're being maintained and checked, that's answers my question. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Is this list is subject to change though, right?
Yes,
Based
yes.
on what you were saying,
Yes.
because you have to and then because of the water, lead, everything we talked about tonight, it's subject to be relooked at it basically and come back and give us an update, basically.
So of the reconstructed streets, I did have a couple others that were different on the list originally, so I have changed that recently to address those lead water services. So the ones that we're proposing are ones that do have some or a significant amount of lead water service replacements. There are some streets that are rated a 1 or 2 that still need to be done where we had no lead water services on, that we're looking to postpone those maybe till 2021. But what I've got proposed here does account for those streets that have several lead service replacements.
That's why I wanted to thank you. I just wanted that re-explained because there are going to be some streets that people go, hey, they're worse than what you're fixing, and it's because of what we're talking about.
Right.
Okay, I just want to
Right.
make that clear because we have the water lead issue that we got to.
Right.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Then we will, being no further business, the study session will be adjourned at 7 PM. Thank you all for presentations.
All the good news?
Yeah. All the good news. Well, it's news anyway.
Yeah.